Hi everyone, it's Daniel here from the studio. There's a multitude of different systems out there, and we use many of them, ranging from Pro Tools to Studio One and Reaper to Final Cut and Premiere Pro that we use for our videos. There is one system, however, that we get asked about more than the others, and that's Reaper. Why do we use it, and how do we set it up? So hello and welcome to our tutorial series on Reaper. Let's start with the basics. This is what a track looks like. This is your track arm button. These are your transport controls. This is your panner, and this is where your effects go. This is your fader, this is your input selector, this is your automation section, and this is your input monitor button. There you go, boom done, have a nice night. Just kidding, let's get started. Your first step for when you open Reaper for the first time is to set your session defaults. This includes setting where your files will record to, inserting a tempo marker, setting up your track layout, selecting your audio system, and enabling your MIDI devices. Let's begin by setting up our default paths. This means setting up where your files will record to, and here we're going to go to Options and click Preferences. Then under General, we're going to click Paths. The first box is where you can select the folder that you'd like Reaper to open by default when saving a project file for the first time. For us, whenever we click the Save As button or see the prompt, more on that later, Reaper will automatically jump to that folder. Next, this is where all of your final bounces will render to when doing a final mixdown. We could just leave this blank and allow it to default to the project directory, but for us, let's say the project file isn't saved before we mix it down for whatever reason. We need to know where that file is and not have to hunt it down. This can always be changed when you're doing a final bounce after you save your project file. This next box is particularly important. If we don't save a project file and give it a name, we need a place to store the audio files. This is a place where we know that they're important and they won't accidentally get deleted. Of course, like always, it's ideal to save your project before beginning any recording. This is just here as a safeguard. Lastly, cache. Store all cache files in a separate location from your recorded audio. Reaper creates a waveform file for every audio file that's recorded. And if you allow it to generate these files in the same place that you save your audio, you'll wind up with something like this. We store it in a separate location because if for some reason you need to clear your cache, you can do that easily. It helps save on space, and in the event you need those files again, Reaper will just regenerate them from your audio. Now, let's work on setting up a session. Let's go back to Preferences and select our audio system. If we're on a Mac, this is easy. Just select your audio interface. If you're on a PC, then you'll need to select ASIO as your audio system and then select your interface below. Next, we can enable any MIDI devices by clicking on that menu item. We can find our device, double-click it, and check both boxes. Then click OK. Unlike many systems, Reaper's layout is extremely flexible. You can choose how your tracks look in your edit window and your mixer panel. For us, we like to keep the mixer panel how it is, but we found that switching our track layout to B gives us the more traditional fader layout that many systems have. We've also found that we have the most flexibility when it comes to our routing and other controls. In order to make sure that each track shows up like this by default, we go to our View tab and select Screen Sets and Layouts. Then next to Track Panel, we're going to select B. Now, your tracks will automatically reflect this new layout. We can press Command-T or Control-T at any time to create a new track. Now, let's insert a time signature marker. To insert a tempo/time signature marker, right-click the timeline and click Insert Tempo Time Signature Marker. We can then type in the location that we need that marker to be. This is formatted as a decimal. The first number is your measure number, and the number in the 10th position represents the beat of that measure. For example, the beginning of the song will be formatted as 1.1 for the first measure of the song and the first beat of the first measure. If there are any tempo changes in the song, we can insert as many as we need. We can then adjust the tempo as necessary. Now, let's select our input. In order to select our input, we can do one of two things. We can click on the track arm button and select our input, or simply drag the track down and the input menu will show. If your inputs don't show up, go back to Preferences and enable those inputs by clicking Device and selecting your first and last input and output. This is a PC-only thing. Then, we can exit Preferences and select your desired input. Next, let's set up our input monitoring. When the speaker icon is an outline, it means metering only. You can pipe in as much signal as you'd like, but you won't be able to hear it until you stop recording and play it back. When the speaker icon is red, you'll be able to hear your sound while it's armed, but once you actually start recording, it'll still be metering only. What we want is for the speaker icon to be a solid gray. This means input monitoring is on, and you'll be able to hear when the track is armed and throughout the recording process. Now, we can create some folder tracks or bus tracks. Let's create a bunch of vocal tracks, as many as we need for our session, plus one extra one. Press Shift and select the first and last vocal track that we created and drag them under the one extra track and to the right. Now, whatever we do to the track on the top will affect all of the tracks under it. Thank you so much for watching this first tutorial on Reaper. In the next video, we'll work on creating reverb sends, doing some basic processing, and working on other things that will help improve your overall workflow by turning on the prompt for location on launch, creating templates, and working on some batch processing.